The cold marble pressed against her cheek, and that was the first thing Penelope Edwards knew, that she was lying on something hard and expensive, and that her head felt like someone had split it open with an axe. She opened her eyes slowly, wincing at the dim light filtering through heavy velvet curtains. The room around her was massive, all dark wood paneling and Gothic architecture that seemed to belong in a European castle rather than anywhere she could remember visiting. Ornate chandeliers hung from a vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of night skies and mythological creatures. The furniture was antique, each piece worth more than she could probably earn in a year if she could remember what she did for a living. That thought made her freeze. She couldn't remember. Penelope pushed herself up on shaking arms, her vision swimming as she tried to orient herself. She was wearing clothes she didn't recognize, a simple white dress that fell to her knees, soft as silk against her skin. Her feet were bare. There were no injuries she could see, no blood, no bruises to explain the pounding in her skull or the complete void where her memories should be. She knew her name, Penelope Edwards. She was 24 years old. She knew what a chandelier was, what marble felt like, that velvet curtains existed. But when she tried to remember where she'd been yesterday, who her friends were, where she lived, there was nothing. Just a terrifying blank space that made her heart race with panic. "You're awake." The voice came from the shadows near the door, and Penelope scrambled backward so fast she nearly fell. A man stepped into the dim light, and her breath caught in her throat. He was the most beautiful and terrifying thing she'd ever seen. His skin was pale as moonlight, almost luminescent in the darkness. His hair fell to his shoulders in waves of pure white that seemed to shimmer like snow. His features were sharp and aristocratic, all high cheekbones and a strong jaw that spoke of centuries of noble breeding. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. They were a deep crimson, like blood backlit by fire, and they watched her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. He wore a black suit that looked tailored to perfection, every line emphasizing his tall, powerful frame. He moved with a grace that seemed almost supernatural, each step deliberate and fluid. "Who are you?" Penelope's voice came out hoarse. "Where am I?" The man stopped several feet away, as if sensing that coming closer would send her fleeing. "My name is Alaric Draconis. You are in my manor, under my protection." "Protection from what?" She forced herself to stand, even though her legs felt like water. "I don't understand what's happening. I can't remember anything, where I was, how I got here, why I—" Her voice broke. "Why can't I remember?" Something flickered across Alaric's face, almost like pain, but it vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. "What do you remember?" "My name. That's it. Just my name, and that I'm 24 and I shouldn't be here." Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. "Did you do something to me? Is this some kind of kidnapping?" "I saved your life," Alaric said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made her believe him despite everything. "You were dying, Penelope Edwards. I brought you here, and I healed you. The memory loss is a side effect of the trauma you suffered. It may return with time, or it may not. I cannot say. Trauma from what?" She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. "What happened to me?" Alaric's jaw tightened, and for a long moment he said nothing. His crimson eyes studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Finally he spoke. "That is something I cannot tell you. Not yet. Not until you are stronger." "That's not an answer." Anger flared through her fear, hot and sharp. "You can't just— I have a right to know what happened to me. Where I came from, who I am beyond just a name. What you have a right to is safety and time to heal." His voice hardened, taking on an edge of command that made her step back instinctively. "I understand your fear and frustration, but there are things you are not ready to hear. Truths that could break you in your current state. I will not risk your sanity for the sake of satisfying your curiosity." "My sanity?" Penelope laughed, and it sounded slightly hysterical even to her own ears. "I woke up in a stranger's house with no memory of my own life, and you're worried about my sanity?" "Yes." The single word was absolute, brooking no argument. "You will remain here until I deem it safe for you to leave. You will be cared for, protected, given everything you need. But you will not leave these grounds, and you will not push me for answers I am not willing to give. Not yet." "You can't keep me prisoner." Alaric's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "I can do whatever is necessary to keep you alive, Penelope Edwards. You would do well to remember that." He turned and walked toward the door, his movements still carrying that unsettling grace. Penelope's heart pounded as she realized he was just going to leave her here with no answers, no explanation beyond vague promises of protection from unnamed threats. "Wait." The word burst from her before she could stop it. Alaric paused, glancing back at her over his shoulder. "At least tell me." She swallowed hard. "Are you going to hurt me?" His expression softened fractionally, and for just a moment she saw something almost human in those inhuman eyes. "Never," he said, and the word carried the weight of a vow. "You are safe here, Penelope. I swear it on my blood and my crown. No harm will come to you within these walls." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that sounded terribly final. Penelope stood alone in the enormous room, her mind spinning with questions and her heart racing with fear. She moved to the window and pulled back the heavy curtains, hoping to at least see where she was. The view took her breath away. The manor sat atop a cliff overlooking a vast forest that stretched to the horizon. The trees were dark and thick, their canopy an endless sea of black-green that looked impenetrable. In the distance she could see mountains rising against the sky, their peaks lost in clouds. There was something otherworldly about the landscape, something that made her feel like she'd stepped outside of time itself, and the sky was the wrong color. It took her a moment to realize what bothered her about it. The light filtering through the window was dim, twilight gray, but when she looked up she could see stars. Not just a few, but thousands of them scattered across a sky that seemed caught between day and night, as if dawn and dusk had somehow merged into eternal gloaming. "Where the hell am I?" she whispered. The following days passed in a strange blur of confusion and isolation. Penelope found that her room was actually a suite, with a massive bedroom, an attached bathroom that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel, and a sitting area filled with books in languages she couldn't read. The doors were not locked, she'd checked immediately, but when she tried to leave she found herself in hallways that seemed to stretch forever, all dark wood and Gothic grandeur that made her feel tiny and lost. Servants appeared periodically, always silent, always pale-skinned with that same ethereal quality as Alaric. They brought her food 3 times a day, elaborate meals that looked like they'd been prepared by a 5-star chef. They brought her clothes, all in her exact size, everything from comfortable loungewear to elegant dresses that seemed plucked from a historical drama. But none of them would speak to her, no matter how much she pleaded for information. They simply bowed and left, their footsteps silent on the marble floors. She only saw Alaric once during those first 3 days, when she'd finally worked up the courage to venture beyond her suite and had gotten hopelessly lost in the winding corridors. She'd been on the verge of panic, convinced she'd wander these hallways forever, when he'd appeared from nowhere like a ghost. "You should not wander," he'd said, his voice stern but not unkind. "This manor is vast and there are places that are not safe for you." "I was trying to find a way out," she'd admitted, too exhausted to lie. "There is no way out, not yet." He gestured for her to follow him. "Come, I will take you back to your chambers. I'm not a prisoner, but I can't leave. I'm safe here, but there are dangerous places. You saved me, but you won't tell me from what." Penelope had stopped walking, forcing him to turn back to face her. "Do you understand how insane this all is? I understand that you are frightened and confused." Alaric had taken a step closer, and even in her frustration she'd been struck again by how otherworldly he was. His white hair caught the dim light from the wall sconces, and his crimson eyes seemed to glow faintly in the shadows. "I understand that you want answers, but I also understand that some truths are more dangerous than ignorance, and I will not risk you for the sake of easing your mind." "Risk me how? What could be worse than this?" She'd gestured at the Gothic hallways around them. "What could be worse than waking up with no memory in a place that feels like it exists outside the normal world?" Alaric had been quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "The truth of what you are," he'd finally said. "The truth of what was done to you and why certain powers would kill you on sight if they knew you existed. That, Penelope Edwards, would be considerably worse than a comfortable room and 3 meals a day." The words had sent a chill down her spine. "What I am, I'm human. I'm just a person who—" "Are you?" He'd tilted his head slightly, studying her. "How do you know? You cannot remember what you were before you woke in my home. You cannot remember your life, your past, what you might have been involved in. You know your name and your age and nothing else. So how can you be certain of what you are?" Penelope had wanted to argue, but the words had died in her throat because he was right. She'd assumed she was normal, human, ordinary, but what if she wasn't? What if there was something about her that she couldn't remember? Something that explained why she was here and why this impossible man with his crimson eyes and white hair was keeping her hidden away. "That's not fair," she'd whispered. "No," Alaric had agreed. "It is not. But it is necessary." He'd held out his hand to her. "Come, let me show you something." She'd hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His skin was cool to the touch, and his fingers had closed around hers with a gentleness that contradicted the strength she could sense in him. He'd led her through more hallways, up a winding staircase, and finally out onto a balcony that overlooked the forest. The strange twilight sky had stretched above them, stars visible despite the gray light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "This is the Shadow Vale," Alaric had said, gesturing to the landscape, "a realm between your world and mine. Time moves differently here. The sun never fully rises, the night never fully falls. It is a place of refuge, of hiding, of sanctuary for those who cannot exist safely in the mortal realm." "The mortal realm," Penelope had repeated slowly. "You're saying we're not? This isn't Earth?" "It is a fold in Earth, a pocket dimension created centuries ago by my ancestors. We are still connected to your world, but we exist slightly outside of it." He'd turned to look at her. "I brought you here because nowhere in the mortal realm was safe for you. Here, in my domain, under my protection, you have a chance to survive. And you still won't tell me what I'm surviving." "No, not until you are ready." That conversation had haunted her for days. She'd spent hours on that balcony afterward, staring out at the impossible sky and trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly become far stranger than she could have imagined. If this place existed, what else was real? Magic? Monsters? The stories her fragmented memory told her were just fairy tales. And what was Alaric really? He moved too gracefully, his skin was too pale, his eyes too unnatural. He talked about realms and protection and powers that wanted her dead. He'd created a sanctuary outside of normal time and space. On the 5th day she found the library. It was by accident she'd been exploring again, restless and going slightly mad from the isolation, when she'd pushed open a set of double doors and found herself facing wall after wall of books. The library was enormous, 3 stories tall with a spiraling staircase that connected the levels. Moonlight, or what passed for moonlight in this strange realm, streamed through stained glass windows that depicted scenes of battles and coronations, and creatures that made her breath catch. Creatures with fangs and crimson eyes, pale-skinned and beautiful, drinking from goblets that held liquid too dark to be wine, vampires. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She stood frozen in the doorway, staring at those windows, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The pale skin, the red eyes, the way Alaric moved with inhuman grace. The servants who never spoke and seemed to glide rather than walk. The realm of eternal twilight where the sun never rose. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He's a vampire, very astute." Penelope spun around to find Alaric standing behind her, and she wondered wildly how long he'd been there, how much he'd seen of her revelation. "You're a vampire," she said aloud, and saying it made it real in a way that just thinking it hadn't. That's not possible. Vampires aren't real, and yet I stand before you." He moved past her into the library, his movements fluid and predatory. "Yes, Penelope Edwards, I am a vampire, the Vampire King to be precise. I rule this realm and all the bloodborne who dwell within it. I have existed for over 800 years and I have never brought a mortal into my home. Not until you." Her mind raced, trying to process this new reality. Vampires existed, they were real, and she was trapped in a pocket dimension with their king, with no memory of how she'd gotten here or why he'd saved her. "Did you?" Her voice shook. "Did you feed on me? Is that why I can't remember? Did you do something to my blood?" Alaric turned to face her fully, and his expression was almost offended. "I have never fed from you without your consent, and I have not tampered with your memories through my blood. What was done to you was done by others, and I am protecting you from them." He paused. "Though I will not lie and say I have not been tempted. Your blood calls to me in ways I have not experienced in centuries. It is part of why you are so valuable and part of why you are in such grave danger. My blood." Penelope touched her neck instinctively, feeling for bite marks, but her skin was smooth and unmarked. "What's special about my blood?" That is the question that started all of this. Alaric moved to one of the windows, his white hair gleaming in the strange light. "But it is not an answer I will give you today. You have learned enough for now. Your mind needs time to adjust to these new truths." "Stop doing that!" Frustration boiled over, hot and sharp. "Stop deciding what I can and can't handle. I'm not a child and I'm not fragile. If I'm in danger, if people want to kill me for my blood or whatever insane reason, I have a right to know why." "You have a right to survive," Alaric said, and there was steel in his voice now. "And I will ensure that survival, even if it means keeping you ignorant of the very things that could drive you to do something foolish." "Like what? Escape? Try to run from the Vampire King who's holding me captive?" "Yes." He turned to face her, and the intensity in his crimson eyes made her take a step back. "Exactly that. Because beyond these walls, beyond the boundaries of the Shadow Vale, there are creatures that would tear you apart to understand what makes your blood so precious. There are vampire lords who would drain you dry and damn the consequences. There are hunters who would burn you alive simply for existing. And there are others, darker things than vampires, who would do worse than kill you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with threat. Penelope's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stand straight, to meet those inhuman eyes without flinching. "Then, tell me what I am," she said quietly. "If I'm going to be imprisoned here for my own protection, at least give me that much. Tell me what's so special about me that the vampire king himself had to save me." Alaric was silent for a long moment. Then finally he spoke. "You are a blood-borne anomaly. A mortal whose blood carries properties that should not exist. Properties that can strengthen vampires beyond measure, or destroy them entirely. Properties that suggest your ancestors were touched by something ancient and powerful, something that left its mark in your very DNA." He moved closer and she fought the urge to retreat. "You are unique, Penelope Edwards. Perhaps the only one of your kind in this generation, and that makes you both infinitely precious and impossibly dangerous." She tried to wrap her mind around his words, but they seemed to slide away like water. "I don't understand. How can blood do that? How can I be? I'm just a person. I'm nobody special." "You are alive because I found you first," Alaric said softly. "You are alive because I was willing to break ancient laws and risk war with the other vampire houses to bring you here. You are alive because I have decided that your life is worth more than peace." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek with cool fingers. "That makes you very special indeed." The touch sent electricity through her skin, and Penelope gasped at the intensity of it. She could feel something in that contact, something that resonated in her bones and made her blood sing in her veins. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Alaric pulled back immediately, his expression darkening. "You see, even the smallest contact creates a reaction. Your blood recognizes what I am, and my nature responds to what you carry. It is a dangerous combination. Is that why you saved me?" The question came out smaller than she'd intended. "Because of what my blood can do for you." His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something almost vulnerable in them. "I saved you because you were dying, and I could not bear to watch it happen. The rest, your blood, your uniqueness, the danger you represent, those are complications I am still learning to navigate." He turned away. "But know this, I will not use you. I will not feed from you without permission. I will not treat you as a resource to be exploited. You are under my protection, and that means you are sacred. Anyone who touches you without your consent will answer to me." The vow sent shivers down her spine. There was something intensely possessive in the way he said it, something that suggested violence waiting to be unleashed on her behalf. "I don't know if I should be comforted or terrified," she admitted. "Both would be appropriate." Alaric glanced back at her. "You should rest. Tomorrow, if you wish, I will have the servants show you more of the manor. You may roam freely in the residential wings and the gardens, but do not venture into the lower levels and do not leave the grounds. Those rules are not negotiable." He left before she could respond, disappearing through the library doors with that impossible vampire grace. Penelope stood alone among the books and stained glass, her mind reeling. She was a blood-borne anomaly, whatever that meant. She was valuable enough that a vampire king had risked war to save her, and her blood apparently did something to vampires that made her both precious and dangerous. She looked down at her hands, half expecting them to look different somehow, but they were just hands. Pale from lack of sunlight maybe, but ordinary. Human. "What the hell is happening to me?" she whispered to the empty library. The books had no answer. Over the following weeks, Penelope settled into a strange routine. She explored the manor during the day, or what passed for day, in this realm of eternal twilight, discovering gardens filled with night-blooming flowers and sculptures that seemed to watch her as she passed. She found a music room with a grand piano that she discovered she could play, though she had no memory of learning. She spent hours in the library, trying to find books in languages she could read, searching for information about blood-borne anomalies and vampire society. The servants slowly began to warm to her, though they still rarely spoke. A young woman named Isolde, pale-skinned and white-haired like all the vampires here, started bringing her tea in the afternoons and would occasionally answer simple questions about the manor. An older male vampire named Corvus, who seemed to be the head of household, began teaching her the layout of the residential wings and explaining which areas were safe for her to explore. But it was Alaric who occupied most of her thoughts. She saw him every evening. He would appear in the library or the gardens or sometimes in her sitting room, always asking how she was, if she needed anything, if she felt well. He never stayed long, always maintaining a careful distance, but his presence filled whatever space he occupied. He would tell her stories sometimes about the history of vampires, about the creation of the Shadow Veil, about the complex politics of the immortal world. He never mentioned her past, and she stopped asking, partly because she was afraid of his answers, and partly because she was beginning to realize that she didn't want to remember. Whatever life she'd had before waking up in this manner, it had led her to the brink of death. Here, in this impossible realm with this dangerous and beautiful vampire king, she felt safer than her instincts said she should. And she was starting to feel something else, too. Something that made her heart race when Alaric entered her room, that made her hyper-aware of every time his eyes lingered on her, that made the distance he maintained between them feel like a physical ache. She was falling for him. It was insane. He was a vampire, a creature that should terrify her. He was keeping her trapped here, refusing to let her leave or give her all the answers she needed. He was dangerous and possessive and absolutely not human, but he was also careful with her in a way that made her chest tight. He looked at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting at any cost. When he spoke to her, he treated her like an equal despite the vast difference in their power and age. And when she caught him watching her with those crimson eyes, there was a hunger there that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with wanting something he wouldn't let himself take. One evening, about a month after she'd arrived, Penelope found Alaric in the gardens. He was standing by a fountain, his white hair stirring in a breeze that seemed to exist only in this pocket of the realm. He looked ethereal and otherworldly, and her breath caught at the sight of him. "You're staring," he said without turning around. "You're beautiful," she replied before she could stop herself. "It's hard not to stare." Alaric turned to face her, and there was something almost pained in his expression. "You should not say such things to me, Penelope." "Why not? It's true." She moved closer, emboldened by the month of safety and care he'd provided. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Terrifying, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But beautiful. I am a predator," he said quietly. "A creature that exists to hunt and feed on your kind. You should fear me, not compliment me. Maybe I should. But I don't." She stopped a few feet away from him. "You've had a month to hurt me, to use me, to do whatever vampires do to valuable humans. But you haven't. You've been nothing but protective and careful and kind, in your own stern, overprotective way. Kindness does not change what I am, no, but it changes how I see you." Penelope took a breath. "Why did you really save me, Alaric? And don't say it was just because I was dying. You're 800 years old, you must have seen countless people die. Why was I different?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because when I found you, broken and bleeding and barely clinging to life, something in me recognized you. Not your blood, not your unique properties, you. Your soul called to mine across the distance between life and death, and I could not let you go." He met her eyes. "I have existed for 8 centuries without feeling that pull, without feeling anything beyond hunger and duty and the weight of my crown. But you made me feel again, Penelope Edwards, and I was too selfish to let you die." Her heart thundered in her chest. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I saved you for the most foolish and dangerous reason possible." He moved closer, and the intensity in his gaze made her weak. "I saved you because in that moment you became mine. Not as a possession, not as a resource. Mine in the way that matters to vampires, in the way that makes us willing to risk everything. I saved you because losing you would have been worse than death. Alaric, I should not have told you this." He turned away sharply. "You should forget I said anything. You are under my protection, nothing more. These feelings are inappropriate and dangerous for both of us. What if I don't want to forget?" Penelope's voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. "What if I feel it too? This pull, this connection. What if I've been falling for you since I woke up in your manor? Then we are both fools." But he didn't move away when she stepped closer. "I don't care." She reached out and touched his hand, feeling that same electric connection she'd felt in the library. "I don't care if it's foolish or dangerous or wrong. I don't remember the person I was before, but I know who I am now. I'm the woman who fell in love with the vampire king who saved her life." Alaric's hand closed around hers, and his control visibly cracked. "You do not know what you are offering. The bond between a vampire and their chosen is absolute. It is consuming and possessive and eternal. If I let myself accept what you are offering, I will never let you go. Never. You would be mine for as long as you live, and I would move heaven and hell to extend that time as long as possible. Then extend it." Penelope used her free hand to touch his face, feeling the cool smoothness of his skin. "Make me yours. Let me choose this. Let me choose you, Penelope." She kissed him. It was clumsy and desperate and probably the bravest thing she'd ever done. His lips were cool against hers, and for a heartbeat he was perfectly still. Then his control shattered completely. Alaric pulled her against him with a sound that was half growl, half groan, and kissed her back with 800 years of restrained hunger. His arms wrapped around her like steel bands, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, but she didn't care. She could feel his power thrumming through him, barely leashed, and the knowledge that he was holding back for her sake made her love him even more. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were practically glowing. "There is no going back from this," he warned, his voice rough. "If you are mine completely. I will not share you, I will not let you go, and I will destroy anyone who tries to take you from me." "Good," Penelope said breathlessly. "Because I don't want to go back, I want to stay right here with you." Alaric made a sound low in his throat and kissed her again, softer this time but no less intense. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "I will tell you everything," he promised. "Your past, what happened to you, why you are hunted, you deserve to know the full truth." "Later," she murmured. "Right now, I just want this." They stayed in the gardens until the eternal twilight deepened into something closer to night, talking and kissing and slowly learning the shape of this new bond between them. Alaric told her about vampire mating bonds, about how rare it was for a vampire to find their true match, about how the connection would grow stronger over time. Penelope told him about her fears and her growing feelings, about how being here with him felt more like home than any missing memory ever could. "I need to show you something," Alaric said eventually. "It is time you saw the truth of this realm and my role in it." He led her deeper into the manor, down staircases she'd been forbidden to use, through corridors that grew progressively more grand and imposing. Finally, they emerged into an enormous throne room that took her breath away. The space was massive, with vaulted ceilings and walls lined with banners bearing intricate crests. The floor was polished black marble that reflected the light from thousands of candles. And at the far end, raised on a dais, sat a throne of dark metal and precious stones that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "This is the heart of my kingdom," Alaric said quietly. "From here, I rule over all vampires within the Shadow Veil and maintain the delicate balance with the mortal world beyond." Penelope walked forward slowly, taking in the grandeur and power on display. This wasn't just a manor, it was a palace, a seat of power for an immortal king. "Why show me this?" she asked. "Because if you are to be mine, you need to understand what that means." Alaric moved to stand beside her. "I am not just a vampire, Penelope. I am the Vampire King. I have responsibilities, enemies, subjects who depend on me for protection and justice. Taking you as my mate makes you a queen, whether you wish the title or not. It makes you a target for my enemies and a symbol for my people." The weight of his words settled over her like a physical thing. She'd been so focused on her feelings for him, on the impossible romance of falling for a vampire king, that she hadn't fully considered the political implications. "I don't know how to be a queen," she said softly. "Neither did I know how to be a king when I first took the throne." Alaric took her hand. "But I learned, and you will too. More importantly, you will not face it alone. I will stand beside you through everything that comes." "Everything," she repeated. "Including the truth about my past?" His expression grew serious. "Yes, it is time." He guided her to sit on the steps leading up to the throne, then settled beside her. "What I am about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but I need you to listen to all of it before you react. Can you do that?" Penelope nodded, her heart starting to race with anxiety. "2 months ago, you were living in Seattle," Alaric began. "You were a graduate student studying hematology, blood diseases, and disorders. You were brilliant, by all accounts, and your research was beginning to touch on areas that made certain people very nervous." "What kind of research?" "You were studying genetic mutations in blood cells, trying to understand why some people's blood had unusual properties. You didn't know it, but you were documenting cases of latent supernatural heritage in humans, people descended from creatures like vampires, werewolves, or Feti who carried traces of that heritage in their blood." He paused. "Including yourself." Penelope's breath caught. "I was researching myself, not consciously, but yes, your blood caught your attention because it was the most dramatic example you could find. You began running tests, trying to isolate what made it different." Alaric's voice grew darker. "And you attracted the attention of a vampire lord named Cassius Draven. He wanted your research, and he wanted you. He sent his people to capture you." The name sent a chill through her, though she couldn't remember ever hearing it before. "What happened?" "You fought back. You tried to destroy your research rather than let them have it. In the struggle, you were badly injured, poisoned by a substance that would have killed you within hours and erased all evidence of what had been done to you. Cassius left you for dead in an alley." Alaric's jaw tightened. "But I had been watching you. I had felt the pull of your blood for weeks, though I had not approached you. When I sensed you dying, I intervened. I killed Cassius's men, took you from the mortal realm, and brought you here to heal. You saved me from other vampires," Penelope said slowly, trying to process everything. "And the memory loss, a side effect of the poison and the trauma. Your mind protected itself by burying the memories too painful to bear. He turned to look at her fully. I did not cause it, but I admit I did not try very hard to restore your memories either. I wanted you to heal without the burden of fear, without the knowledge of what had nearly been done to you. Perhaps that was selfish. Selfish, she repeated. Then unexpectedly she laughed. It was a shaky, slightly hysterical sound. You saved my life, protected me from people who wanted to hurt me, and gave me time to heal without trauma. Yes, how incredibly selfish of you. You are not angry, I'm terrified, Penelope admitted. There are vampires out there who want to use me, who want my research. I was poisoned and left to die. That's absolutely terrifying. She took his hand. But I'm alive because you saved me. I'm safe because you protected me. And I have a chance at happiness because you cared enough to let me heal. So no, I'm not angry. I'm grateful. Alaric looked stunned. You are extraordinary. I'm a graduate student with weird blood who fell in love with a vampire king, she corrected. That's either extraordinary or clinically insane. Possibly both. He actually smiled then, and the expression transformed his face from beautiful to devastating. Definitely both. They sat together on the throne room steps, and Penelope let the truth of her past settle over her. She'd been a researcher, a scientist, someone who had unknowingly stumbled into the supernatural world through her own work. She'd been targeted and nearly killed for what she knew and what she was, but she'd also been saved. She'd been given a second chance in this impossible realm, with this impossible man who looked at her like she hung the stars. What happens now? She asked quietly. You said taking me as your mate makes me a target. What do we do about that? Now we make sure that every vampire in existence knows you are under my protection as my chosen mate, Alaric said. We formalize the bond in front of the court, and we make it clear that touching you means war with me and all my forces. Cassius Draven is dead, but others will have heard about you. We need to eliminate the threat before it grows. That sounds dangerous. It will be, but you will not face it alone. He stood and pulled her to her feet, and there is something else. As my mate, you will need to be turned eventually. Remaining human while bonded to a vampire king is complicated. The bond strains the mortal body over time. You would age while I remained unchanged. You would die while I continued on. The thought of becoming a vampire sent a mixture of fear and strange excitement through her. Is that what you want? For me to become like you? I want you to have the choice I never had, Alaric said carefully. I was turned against my will 800 years ago, thrust into this life without consent. If you choose to become vampire, it will be your decision, made with full knowledge of what it means. But Penelope, he cupped her face in his cool hands. I will not lie and say I do not hope you choose immortality. The thought of watching you age and die, of losing you to time when we have only just found each other, it is unbearable. Tears pricked her eyes at the raw emotion in his voice. How long do I have to decide? Years, if you wish. The bond can sustain a mortal for some time, especially if we are careful. There is no rush. He kissed her forehead gently. But eventually a choice will have to be made. Then I'll think about it, Penelope promised. But not tonight. Tonight, I just want to be with you. Alaric's eyes darkened with emotion, and he pulled her close. You have no idea how much I have wanted to hear you say that. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Alaric began introducing her to his court, the dozens of vampires who served him and lived within the Shadow Veil. They were uniformly beautiful and intimidating, with their pale skin and white hair and eyes that ranged from crimson to silver to deep purple. Most treated her with careful respect, bowing to her as their king's chosen mate. A few looked at her with suspicion or hunger, but Alaric's presence kept them in check. Penelope learned about vampire society, the complex hierarchy, the ancient laws that governed their kind, the delicate balance they maintained with the mortal world. She learned that vampires could survive on stored blood or animal blood if necessary, though human blood was always preferred. She learned about their strengths and weaknesses, their politics and power struggles, and she learned more about Alaric himself. How he'd become king after leading a rebellion against a tyrant centuries ago. How he'd built the Shadow Veil as a place where vampires could exist without constant fear of hunters. How he'd maintained peace through strength and careful diplomacy, earning the respect of both his own kind and the other supernatural communities. He was an extraordinary leader, fair but firm, powerful but not cruel. His people loved him, and Penelope began to understand the weight of the crown he carried. She also began to understand the depth of his feelings for her. He was possessive in ways that should have frightened her, but instead made her feel treasured. He was protective to the point of hovering, always making sure she was safe and comfortable. And he was tender in private moments, gentle with her in ways that contradicted his fearsome reputation. They spent their evenings together, talking for hours about everything and nothing. He taught her about his world, and she told him about what little she remembered and was learning about hers. They explored the manor grounds together, and he showed her the hidden beauty of the shadow veil, the way the eternal twilight made everything look ethereal, the way the stars were always visible, the way time seemed to slow within its boundaries. And they grew closer in every way that mattered. The bond between them deepened with each passing day, until Penelope could feel him even when he wasn't in the room. She could sense his emotions through some connection she didn't fully understand, and she knew he could feel hers too. It was intense and overwhelming and absolutely perfect, but perfection never lasted. The attack came on a night when Alaric had been called away to deal with a dispute in another part of the realm. Penelope had been in the library, reading about vampire history, when the screaming started. She ran to the window and saw figures in black moving through the gardens. They moved with supernatural speed, cutting down the guards Alaric had left to protect her. Vampires fighting vampires and blood staining the night-blooming flowers. Terror seized her, but she forced herself to think. Alaric had told her what to do in case of attack. There was a safe room in the lower levels, heavily warded and protected. She needed to get there. Penelope ran for the door, but it burst open before she could reach it. A vampire she didn't recognize stood there, his crimson eyes fixed on her with predatory hunger. Unlike Alaric and his court, this vampire had black hair and darker skin, though still pale by human standards. The bloodborne anomaly, he said, his voice carrying a European accent she couldn't place. Cassius was right about you, such a precious prize. Cassius is dead, Penelope said, backing away slowly. Yes, killed by your precious king. But Cassius had allies, and we do not take the murder of our own lightly. The vampire moved into the library with liquid grace. You will come with me. Alaric Draconis will learn that his actions have consequences. I'm not going anywhere with you. You misunderstand. That was not a request. He moved with vampire speed, crossing the distance between them in a blink. Penelope tried to run, but he caught her easily, his hand closing around her throat. She struggled, kicking and clawing, but it was like fighting a statue. He was impossibly strong. Your blood will make us powerful, the vampire whispered, his fangs extending. Let us see what makes you so special. Pain exploded in her neck as his fangs sank into her skin. Penelope screamed, feeling her blood being pulled from her veins. The sensation was violating and horrible, and she felt herself weakening within seconds. Then the vampire was suddenly torn away from her, thrown across the library with enough force to shatter a bookshelf. Alaric stood there, and he was absolutely terrifying. His eyes blazed with crimson fire, his fangs fully extended, and the power radiating from him made the air shimmer. He looked like death incarnate, like every nightmare about vampires made real. You dare, he said, his voice barely recognizable. You dare touch what is mine. The other vampire tried to stand, but Alaric was on him in an instant. What followed was brutal and violent, and Penelope couldn't look away despite the horror of it. Alaric moved with lethal precision, every strike designed to cause maximum damage. The fight lasted less than a minute, ending when Alaric literally tore the other vampire's head from his shoulders. Then he was at Penelope's side, his blood-stained hands gentle as he touched her face. Penelope, look at me, look at me. She met his eyes, seeing the fear there beneath the rage. I'm okay, she managed. He bit me, but I'm okay. You are not okay. He fed from you without permission. He violated the most sacred law of our kind. Alaric pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I should have been here. I should have protected you better. This is my fault. It's not your fault. You couldn't have known. I am the king. It is my duty to know, to protect what is mine. He pulled back enough to look at the bite mark on her neck, and a growl rumbled through his chest. He marked you. That is unforgivable. Alaric, I'm fine. Scared, but fine. Penelope touched his face, trying to bring him back from the edge of whatever dark place he'd gone to. You saved me again. That's what matters. He closed his eyes, clearly struggling for control. When he opened them again, the glow had faded fractionally. There are more of them. A full assault on the manor. My guards are handling them, but we need to get you to safety. He picked her up like she weighed nothing and carried her through the manor at vampire speed, moving so fast everything blurred. They descended into the lower levels, through corridors that grew progressively more fortified, until they reached a door carved with intricate symbols that seemed to pulse with power. Alaric spoke words in a language she didn't recognize, and the door opened. Inside was a room lined with metal and stone, lit by glow globes that gave off steady light. It was clearly designed to be a bunker, with supplies and weapons and thick walls that looked impregnable. He set her down carefully, then cupped her face in his hands. You will stay here until I return. This room is warded against all supernatural creatures except those of my direct bloodline. No one can get to you here. Where are you going? To end this threat once and for all. His eyes blazed again. They attacked my home. They touched my mate. They will learn what happens when you make an enemy of the vampire king. Alaric, please be careful. He kissed her fiercely, desperately, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. I will return to you. That is a promise. Then he was gone, the door sealing behind him with a sound like thunder. Penelope sank down against the wall, her hand pressed to her neck where the bite mark throbbed. She could feel the violation of it, the wrongness of having her blood taken without consent. But more than that, she could feel Alaric's rage through their bond, a burning fury that promised violence on her behalf. She hoped whoever had organized this attack understood what they'd unleashed. Hours passed. Penelope had no way to tell time in the windowless bunker, but it felt like an eternity. She paced and worried and tried not to imagine all the horrible things that could be happening above. The bond with Alaric remained steady, a constant presence in her chest that told her he was alive and fighting, but it offered no details. When the door finally opened, she nearly collapsed with relief. Alaric stood there, covered in blood that wasn't his own, but alive and whole. Behind him she could see Isolde and Corvus, both looking equally blood-stained but unharmed. It is over, Alaric said quietly. The attackers are dead or fled. The manor is secure. Penelope ran to him, not caring about the blood, and threw her arms around him. He held her tight, and she felt a shudder run through his powerful frame. I thought I would lose you, he whispered into her hair. When I felt your fear through the bond, when I sensed that another vampire had touched you. I have never known terror like that. I'm okay. We're okay. She pulled back to look at him. Is it really over? For now. But this was organized by a coalition of vampire lords who wanted revenge for Cassius's death and access to your blood. They will not stop coming unless we make a statement. He looked at her seriously. Penelope, I need to formalize our bond. Publicly in front of representatives from all the major vampire houses. I need to make it absolutely clear that you are my mate, my queen, and that attacking you is an act of war. A public ceremony, she said slowly. In front of everyone. Yes, it will be binding and irrevocable. It will tie your life to mine in ways that cannot be undone. And it will make you a target for anyone who wants to weaken me. He stroked her hair gently. I will understand if you wish to refuse. This is not the life you chose when you agreed to be mine. Penelope looked up at this extraordinary vampire who had saved her life, who had given her time to heal, who had fought for her and protected her and loved her with an intensity that still took her breath away. He was asking her to step fully into his world, to accept the dangers and responsibilities that came with being his mate. It should have been a terrifying prospect. But all she felt was certainty. When, she asked. Alaric blinked. When what? When is the ceremony? Because I'm ready. I want to do this. I want to be yours officially in front of everyone with no question or doubt. She took his blood-stained hands in hers. You saved me, Alaric. You gave me a second chance at life. And I've fallen in love with you, the vampire king, the leader, the man who is both terrifying and gentle. I want this life with you, dangers and all. He pulled her close and kissed her with a desperation that spoke of all the fear he'd felt, all the relief at having her safe. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were bright with emotion. 3 days, he said. I will call the vampire lords here for a formal assembly. We will perform the bonding ceremony in front of them all, and they will witness our union. His voice hardened. And any who object can take their complaints up with me personally. The threat in those words was clear, and Penelope couldn't help but smile. Very romantic. I am an 800-year-old vampire king. Romance is not my strongest skill. I disagree. She kissed him again, softer this time. You're doing just fine. The next 3 days were chaos. The manor filled with vampires from all over, representatives from the great houses, minor lords seeking favor, courtiers and diplomats and warriors. Penelope was kept busy with preparations, being fitted for a dress that looked like something from a Gothic fairy tale, learning the protocols and rituals that would be part of the ceremony. Isolde helped her understand the politics at play, explaining which vampires were allies and which were potential threats. Corvus taught her the formal greetings and behaviors expected of a vampire queen, and Alaric spent every spare moment with her, making sure she felt prepared and supported. Are you certain about this? He asked the night before the ceremony, as they stood together on the balcony overlooking the shadow veil. Once the bond is formalized, there is no breaking it. You will be tied to me for as long as you live, I'm certain. Penelope leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. I know it's fast. I know I've only been here 2 months, and I can't remember most of my life before that. But I know this feels right. You feel right. You are braver than I am, Alaric said softly. I have lived for 8 centuries. And I have never been as terrified as I am right now. Terrified that you will come to regret this. terrified that I will fail to protect you, terrified that I am being selfish by binding you to me when you deserve so much more. Hey, she turned in his arms to face him. You're not selfish, you're giving me a choice and I'm choosing you. Freely, fully, with no regrets, okay? He rested his forehead against hers. You are the best thing that has happened to me in 800 years, Penelope Edwards. I will spend the rest of your life proving that I am worthy of this gift you are giving me. You already have, she whispered. They stood together under the eternal twilight, holding each other, until Isolde came to tell Penelope it was time to rest before the ceremony. The throne room had been transformed for the occasion. Hundreds of candles burned in elaborate candelabras, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The banners of all the great vampire houses hung from the rafters, a display of the power and history gathered in this space. And vampires filled every available space, pale-skinned, beautiful, dangerous creatures watching with crimson eyes as Penelope entered. She wore a dress of midnight blue silk that seemed to shimmer in the candlelight, with intricate silver embroidery that spiraled up the bodice and down the flowing skirt. Her hair had been styled elaborately, twisted up with silver pins that Isolde said had belonged to Alaric's mother centuries ago. She looked like something from a Gothic painting, both human and otherworldly. Alaric waited for her at the base of his throne, dressed in formal attire that made him look every inch the vampire king. His white hair had been pulled back, emphasizing the sharp lines of his face, and his crimson eyes burned as he watched her approach. The room fell silent as she walked down the center aisle, every vampire tracking her movements. She could feel their attention like a physical weight, could sense the hunger and curiosity and calculation in their gazes. But she kept her eyes on Alaric, drawing strength from the love and pride she saw in his expression. When she reached him, he took her hand and brought it to his lips. You look breathtaking, he murmured, too quietly for the assembled vampires to hear. You look like a king, she replied. He guided her to stand beside him, then turned to address the throne room. His voice rang out with absolute authority. I have called you here to witness an event that has not occurred in over 300 years, the formal bonding of a vampire king to his chosen mate. Alaric's hand tightened on hers. Penelope Edwards is a blood-born anomaly, unique among mortals. She is also the woman I have claimed as mine, the one my soul has chosen to bind with for eternity. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but no one dared speak out loud. The bonding ceremony will tie her life to mine, make her my queen, and place her under the absolute protection of my crown and my power. Any who harm her will answer to me with their life. Any who threaten her will find themselves at war with me, and all who serve me. He looked out at the assembled vampires, his gaze cold and commanding. Are there any here who would object to this union? The silence stretched. Penelope held her breath, waiting for someone to challenge them. But one by one, the vampires in the throne room bowed their heads in acceptance. Then we proceed, Alaric said. What followed was a ritual that was both beautiful and unsettling. Alaric spoke vows in the ancient vampire language, his voice carrying power that made the air shimmer. He produced a ceremonial blade and cut his palm, letting his blood, dark and almost black, drip into a silver chalice. Then he held the blade out to Penelope. She'd known this was coming. The bonding required a blood exchange, a mixing of mortal and vampire that would create a permanent tie between them. She took the blade with steady hands and cut her own palm, wincing at the sharp pain, and let her blood join his in the chalice. Alaric spoke more words in that ancient language, then raised the chalice. He drank first, his eyes never leaving hers, then offered it to her. Penelope hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then she drank. The taste was coppery and strange. Both his blood and hers mixed together. But the moment it touched her tongue, power exploded through her. She gasped, feeling something lock into place in her chest, feeling a connection to Alaric that went beyond anything she'd experienced before. She could feel his heart beating in time with hers, could sense his emotions as clearly as her own, could feel the ancient power that ran through his vampire veins. The bond snapped into place with almost physical force, and she would have fallen if Alaric hadn't caught her. Easy, he murmured. The first moments are overwhelming. I can feel you, she whispered. Everything, your power, your emotions, your presence, it's incredible, and I can feel you. He helped her straighten, his hand steadying her. Your warmth, your life, your soul. You are part of me now, Penelope, and I am part of you. He turned back to the assembled vampires, still holding her close. The bond is complete. Penelope Edwards is now Penelope Draconis, Queen of the Shadow Vale and my mate for eternity. You will treat her with the respect and honor due her station, or you will answer to me. The vampires in the throne room bowed as one, acknowledging her new status. Penelope felt the weight of their attention, the significance of what had just happened. She was a vampire queen now, bonded to an immortal king, tied to a world she'd barely begun to understand. But she wasn't afraid. Because she could feel Alaric through the bond, could sense his love and pride and fierce protectiveness. She wasn't alone in this. She would never be alone again. The ceremony concluded with formal acknowledgments from each of the great houses, every vampire lord swearing to recognize the bond and respect her position. It took hours, and by the end, Penelope was exhausted despite the power still thrumming through her from the blood exchange. Finally, Alaric dismissed the assembly and led her from the throne room to his private chambers. The moment the door closed behind them, shutting out the rest of the world, he pulled her into his arms. "You were magnificent," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Watching you walk toward me, watching you accept the bond without hesitation, I have never been more proud or more humbled." "I could feel you the whole time," Penelope said. "Your strength, your confidence, it made everything easier. That is the bond. We are truly one now in all the ways that matter." He kissed her softly. "Are you well? The blood exchange can be draining for mortals. I'm tired, but I feel amazing, like there's power running through my veins." She looked up at him. "Is it always like this? The initial surge will fade, but you will always carry a trace of my power now. It will make you stronger, faster, harder to harm, and it will extend your life significantly, even without turning." He stroked her hair gently. "You are no longer fully mortal, Penelope. You exist somewhere between human and vampire now. It is a rare state, and it comes with both benefits and challenges." "Challenges like what?" "You will need blood occasionally, though not as much as a full vampire. Your senses will sharpen. You will be more sensitive to sunlight, though it will not kill you as it would me." He paused. "And you will draw the attention of supernatural creatures who can sense the power you carry. The bond marks you as mine, but it also marks you as something unique. So I went from being hunted for my blood to being hunted for being your bonded mate." Penelope couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity. "My life has gotten very complicated. Yes, but you will not face it alone." Alaric lifted her easily and carried her to the massive bed that dominated his chamber. "Rest now. You have earned it after enduring hours of vampire politics. Will you stay always?" He lay down beside her, pulling her close. "I will always stay with you, Penelope. That is the promise of the bond." She curled against him, feeling the steady presence of him through their connection. The exhaustion finally caught up with her, and she drifted off to sleep, feeling safer and more content than she could ever remember. The weeks following the bonding ceremony were an adjustment. Penelope learned to navigate her new role as vampire queen, sitting beside Alaric as he held court and made decisions that affected their entire realm. She learned the intricacies of vampire politics, the careful dance of alliances and power plays that kept their society functioning. And she learned to wield the authority that came with her position, discovering that the vampires responded to confidence and clear commands. She also learned to live with the bond. It was overwhelming at times, feeling Alaric's emotions alongside her own, sensing his presence even when he was far away. But it was also beautiful. They never had to guess what the other was feeling or thinking. The connection between them was absolute and honest. The physical changes were equally dramatic. Penelope discovered she could move faster now, her reflexes enhanced by the vampire blood running through her. Her senses sharpened, she could hear conversations from rooms away, could see perfectly in the dim light of the shadow veil. And she found herself craving blood occasionally, a hunger that Alaric helped her satisfy with carefully prepared supplies. "You are adapting remarkably well," Isolde told her one afternoon as they walked through the gardens. "Most humans who bond with vampires struggle for months with the changes. You have embraced them in weeks." "I don't really have a choice," Penelope said. "This is my life now. I can either fight it or accept it, and fighting seems exhausting." "That is a very practical attitude." Isolde paused by the fountain. "May I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you regret it? Bonding with Alaric, becoming queen, giving up your mortal life?" Penelope thought about it seriously. Did she regret any of this? The danger, the politics, the transformation into something not quite human? She looked up at the eternal twilight sky, thought about the vampire king who loved her with terrifying intensity, considered the impossible life she was building in this pocket of reality. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. This isn't the life I planned. I couldn't have planned it since I didn't even know this world existed. But it's the life I have, and it's the life I want. Alaric makes me happy. Being here, learning about this world, growing into this role, it all feels right." She smiled at Isolde. "Does that sound crazy?" "It sounds like love," Isolde said gently. "And love is the only thing that makes any of this bearable for vampires or mortals." That conversation stayed with Penelope as she continued to settle into her new life. She started working on projects of her own, establishing a library of scientific texts in the Manor, creating a research program to study blood-borne anomalies safely. Her background in hematology proved useful in understanding the supernatural world from a scientific perspective, and Alaric supported her endeavors completely. "You are brilliant," he told her one night as she showed him her latest findings. "Approaching our world with scientific inquiry, no vampire has ever thought to do that. You will revolutionize how we understand ourselves." "I'm just applying what I know to a new context," Penelope said, but she was pleased by his praise. "Besides, it keeps me busy while you're dealing with political matters. I would have you beside me for those as well, but I know you find them tedious." He pulled her onto his lap and she settled against him comfortably. The bond hummed between them, warm and content. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only twice, you're slipping." She kissed him softly. "I love you too, even when you're being overprotective and kingly." "I am always overprotective and kingly. It is my nature. I know, it's part of your charm." They stayed like that, wrapped in each other, until duty called Alaric away to handle a dispute between two vampire houses. Penelope watched him go, still amazed that this powerful ancient creature had chosen her, had bound himself to her for eternity. 6 months after the bonding ceremony, a messenger arrived from the mortal world. He was human, which was unusual. Most vampires handled communication between realms themselves. But this man carried a letter sealed with wax and addressed specifically to Penelope Edwards. Alaric was immediately suspicious. "Who would write to you from the mortal realm? Your old life is behind you now." "I don't know, but I need to read it." Penelope broke the seal carefully and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the words made her heart race. "Miss Edwards, you don't know me, but I was a colleague of yours at the university. My name is Dr. James Richardson, and I was helping you with your research before you disappeared. The official story is that you died in an accident, but I never believed it. I found something in your lab after you vanished, notes about a vampire named Cassius Draven who was threatening you. I've been trying to find out what happened ever since. I know this sounds insane, but I need to speak with you if you're still alive. Your research was groundbreaking, and there are people who need the information you discovered. People with unusual blood who are being hunted by creatures they don't understand. Please, if you receive this, contact me. I want to help." The letter included an email address and a phone number. Penelope read it twice, her mind racing. James Richardson. The name stirred something in her fragmented memories, a vague sense of familiarity, of someone she'd worked with and trusted. He was looking for her. He wanted to continue her research. "What does it say?" Alaric asked, his tone careful. She handed him the letter and watched his expression darken as he read. "This is dangerous," he said finally. "If he knows about vampires, if he has your research notes, he could expose our entire world. He could bring hunters down on anyone with unusual blood, including you. Or he could help people," Penelope countered. "He says there are others like me being hunted. If I could share what I've learned here, if I could help them understand what they are and how to stay safe." "Absolutely not." Alaric's voice hardened into the tone he used when giving orders. "You will not contact this man. You will not risk exposure. The mortal world believes you are dead, and that is for the best." "You can't just decide that for me," Penelope said, anger flaring. "This is my research, my former life. If there are people in danger, I should help them. And put yourself at risk in the process. Put our entire realm at risk." He stood, towering over her. "I forbid it, Penelope. You will not contact him." The word forbid made her see red. "You don't get to forbid me from doing anything. I'm your mate, not your possession. You are my queen and my responsibility. I will protect you even from yourself if necessary." They stared at each other, the bond between them crackling with their conflicting emotions. Finally, Penelope turned away. "I need some air." She left before he could stop her, walking quickly through the manor to the gardens. Her mind spun with frustration and confusion. Alaric was being overprotective again, trying to control her choices out of fear for her safety. But Dr. Richardson's letter had awakened something in her, a sense of responsibility to the research she'd started, to the people who might see suffering because they didn't understand what they were. She couldn't just ignore that. Could she? "Your Majesty." Penelope turned to find Corvus approaching, his expression concerned. "I'm sorry, I just needed to. I understand. The king is also upset. Your argument could be felt throughout the manor." The old vampire paused. "May I offer some advice?" "Please." "King Alaric has ruled for 8 centuries, and in all that time he has never bonded with anyone. He has never allowed himself to care so deeply that losing someone would break him." Corvus looked at her kindly. "You are his first vulnerability in 800 years. It terrifies him. So he tries to protect you from everything, even reasonable risks. But you cannot live your life without any risk at all. So what do I do? Remind him that you are partners. That you bonded with him not to be protected like a fragile treasure, but to stand beside him as equals. Corvus smiled slightly. He will listen. He loves you too much not to. Penelope thought about that as she returned to Alaric's chambers. She found him standing by the window, his posture tense. The bond between them ached with his worry and her frustration. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. He turned, and the relief in his eyes was palpable. "I am the one who should apologize. I should not have spoken to you as if you were a subject to command rather than my partner." "You're scared," Penelope said, moving closer. "I can feel it through the bond. You're terrified something will happen to me." Constantly. The admission seemed to cost him. "Every moment of every day I am aware of how fragile mortal life is, even enhanced by our bond. I am aware of all the threats that exist, all the ways I could lose you. And the thought of losing you," his voice broke. "It would destroy me, Penelope, utterly and completely." She took his hands in hers. "I know, I can feel how much you love me, how deeply you care. But Alaric, I need to be able to make my own choices, even choices that involve some risk. Otherwise, I'm just existing here, not really living. I know." He pulled her close. "I know, and I hate that I know, because it means I have to let you do things that terrify me." "Not alone," Penelope said. "We do them together. That's what the bond means, right? Partners in everything." He rested his forehead against hers. "What do you want to do about the letter?" "I want to contact Dr. Richardson, carefully with precautions, but I want to help if I can." She looked up at him. "My research could save lives, Alaric. People like me who don't understand what they are. I can't just abandon them." "Then we do it carefully," he agreed. "I will have my people investigate this James Richardson first, make sure he is who he claims to be and not a threat. Then we arrange a meeting in neutral territory, with guards present. You can share information that will help without exposing yourself or our realm. Does that work?" "Yes." She kissed him gratefully. "Thank you for trusting me. Always. Even when it terrifies me." The investigation into Dr. James Richardson took 2 weeks, but it confirmed his story. He was a legitimate researcher, a hematologist who had worked with Penelope at the university. He'd been genuinely concerned about her disappearance and had been quietly investigating supernatural phenomena ever since. He appeared to be trustworthy, if naive about the dangers involved. They arranged a meeting in Seattle, in a coffee shop that Alaric's people had thoroughly vetted. Alaric insisted on coming with her, along with 2 guards disguised as regular humans. Penelope didn't argue. She knew this concession to her desire to help was already pushing his comfort zone. Walking into the mortal world after 6 months in the Shadow Vale was jarring. The sunlight hurt her enhanced eyes, and the noise of the city was overwhelming after the quiet of the manor. But Alaric stayed close, his hand firm around hers, and gradually she adjusted. Dr. James Richardson was waiting at a corner table, looking nervous and eager. He was in his 30s, with dark hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When he saw Penelope, his face lit up with relief. "Miss Edwards, I can't believe you're actually alive. Please, call me Penelope. And yes, I'm alive, though my circumstances are complicated." She sat down across from him, with Alaric settling beside her. "This is Alaric, he's my husband." James looked at Alaric and clearly saw something that made him nervous: the pale skin, the unnatural grace, the crimson eyes hidden behind sunglasses. "You're one of them." "A vampire." "Yes," Alaric said simply. "And I am the reason Penelope is alive. I saved her from Cassius Draven's people and have protected her ever since." "I need to know something first," James said, looking between them. "Your research, Penelope, do you still want it used to help people? Because I have files full of cases, people with unusual blood being hunted, being used, not understanding what they are." "If we could help them, I do," Penelope said firmly, ignoring the tension she felt from Alaric through the bond. "That's why I agreed to meet you. I want to help, but we have to be careful. There are forces in the supernatural world that wouldn't take kindly to this information being shared." What followed was a long conversation about her research, about blood-borne anomalies and how to identify them safely. Penelope shared what she'd learned in the Shadow Vale, the scientific understanding of supernatural heritage. James took notes frantically, asking intelligent questions and offering insights of his own. By the end of the meeting, they'd established a plan. James would continue his work in the mortal world, helping people understand what they were and how to stay safe. Penelope would provide information and resources from the Shadow Vale, and Alaric's people would offer protection to those who needed it, creating a network of safety for blood-borne anomalies. "Thank you," James said as they prepared to leave. "Both of you. This could change everything for people like you, Penelope. Just be careful," she warned. "And if you ever feel threatened, contact us immediately. We'll help." They left the coffee shop and Alaric pulled her close as they walked back to where his people had created a portal to the Shadow Vale. "You did well," he said quietly. "I am proud of you, even though it scared you, especially because it scared me. You chose to help others despite the risk, and you did it with intelligence and caution. You are everything a queen should be." He kissed her forehead. "I am honored to call you mine." Penelope's heart swelled with love for this complex, protective, extraordinary vampire. "Take me home," she said, always. They stepped through the portal together, back into the eternal twilight of the Shadow Vale, back to their realm and their life together. The months that followed were filled with purpose and growth. Penelope's collaboration with Dr. Richardson flourished, helping dozens of blood-borne anomalies understand their heritage and stay safe. She established a sanctuary within the Shadow Vale for those who needed protection, creating a place where humans with supernatural heritage could learn about their nature without fear. Alaric supported her completely, providing resources and protection for her projects. He was still protective, still prone to worrying about her safety, but he learned to channel that concern into productive action rather than restrictive control. They grew together, learning to balance their partnership with his role as king and her role as queen. And they loved each other with an intensity that only deepened with time. The bond between them was a constant presence, a connection that made them stronger together than they ever could have been apart. A year after the bonding ceremony, Penelope finally made her decision about turning. She'd thought about it carefully, weighing what she would gain against what she would lose. The choice to become fully vampire was permanent and irreversible. But when she looked at Alaric, when she felt the bond between them and imagined centuries of time together instead of just decades, the decision became obvious. "I want to turn," she told him one evening as they stood on their balcony. "I want to become like you, to share your immortality. I want forever with you, Alaric." His expression was a mixture of joy and concern. "You are certain? Once it is done, there is no going back. I'm certain. I've never been more certain of anything." She took his hands. "This is my choice, freely made. Turn me, Alaric. Make me yours completely." The turning ceremony was private, just the two of them in his chambers. Alaric explained the process carefully. He would drain her blood nearly to death, then feed her his own. Her body would die and be reborn as vampire, transformed by the ancient magic in his bloodline. "It will hurt," he warned. "The transition is painful. But I will be with you through all of it." "I trust you," Penelope said. He pulled her close and kissed her deeply, putting all his love into that contact. Then he pulled back and let his fangs extend. "Are you ready?" "Yes." The first bite was sharp pain, then a strange, floating sensation as her blood drained away. Alaric held her carefully, his movements gentle despite the violence of what he was doing. Penelope felt herself weakening, felt her heart slowing, felt the world growing dim and distant. Then he bit his own wrist and pressed it to her lips. "Drink," he commanded. She did, and vampire blood flooded her system. It burned like fire in her veins, spreading through her body with searing intensity. Penelope gasped, her back arching with pain as her human body died and something new took its place. Her heart stopped, then restarted with a different rhythm. Her senses exploded, suddenly able to perceive everything with crystal clarity. And power, ancient, immense power, flooded through her. When the transformation finally completed, she opened her eyes and saw the world as a vampire for the first time. Everything was sharper, clearer, more vivid. She could hear Alaric's breathing, could smell the lingering scent of her human blood, could feel the power thrumming through her new body. And the bond between them had intensified beyond anything she'd experienced before. She could feel him as clearly as she felt herself. Their souls truly merged into one. "Penelope," Alaric whispered, his voice filled with awe. "Look at you." She found a mirror and gasped. Her skin had paled to moonlight white, taking on that luminescent quality all vampires possessed. Her hair had lightened to silver white, falling in soft waves around her face. And her eyes had turned a brilliant crimson, glowing faintly in the dim light. "I'm beautiful," she breathed. "You were always beautiful. Now you are eternal." Alaric moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "How do you feel?" "Powerful. Alive in a way I wasn't before. And hungry." She could feel the bloodlust now, the vampire's endless need for sustenance. But it didn't frighten her. This was what she was now. "That is normal. Come, I will teach you to feed properly." He led her from the chambers, and Penelope marveled at how differently she moved, faster, more gracefully. With supernatural ease, they spent the night together, with Alaric teaching her to use her new abilities. She learned to move with vampire speed, to hear across vast distances, to sense the presence of other supernatural creatures. She learned to feed from stored blood, managing the hunger that defined her new existence. and she learned what it meant to be truly bonded with Alaric. As vampires, their connection was absolute and unbreakable. They could sense each other's thoughts if they wished, could share power through their bond, could exist as two halves of a unified whole. "This is what I wanted," Penelope said as dawn approached, or what passed for dawn in the eternal twilight. "This is perfect." "Yes," Alaric agreed, holding her close. "This is perfect." They stood together on the balcony watching the strange sky, and Penelope felt complete in a way she never had before. She was vampire now, queen of the Shadow Vale, bonded eternally to the king who had saved her life and won her heart. She had woken in a strange manner with no memory, frightened and alone. Now she stood beside the vampire king who had protected her, loved her, and given her a new life beyond anything she could have imagined. The threats hadn't disappeared. There would always be dangers, always enemies who resented their power or coveted what they had. But they would face everything together, partners and mates and equals. "I love you," Penelope said, turning to kiss him. "And I love you," Alaric replied. For eternity. Years passed in the Shadow Vale, though time moved strangely in their pocket dimension. Penelope grew into her role as vampire queen, beloved by their subjects and respected by their allies. Her sanctuary for bloodborne anomalies expanded, helping countless people understand their heritage and find safety. Her collaboration with Dr. Richardson continued, creating a network of protection and education that saved lives across the mortal world. And through it all, Alaric stood beside her. They ruled together, loved together, faced every challenge as partners. The bond between them only strengthened with time, becoming the foundation of everything they built. They had eternity ahead of them, and they would spend it together, the vampire king and his queen, protecting their realm and their people, loving each other with the intensity that had brought them together in the first place. Penelope never regretted her choice. Not for a single moment. Because she had found something she never knew. She was searching for a love that transcended death, a partnership that made her stronger, and a life that fulfilled her in ways she'd never imagined possible. She had woken in a strange manner with no memory and no understanding of what had happened to her. Now she knew exactly who she was and where she belonged. She was Penelope Draconis, queen of the Shadow Vale and eternal mate to the vampire king. And she was exactly where she was meant to be forever.